All right, welcome to the video about the NAPS Ghost Pot Program Winter Project 2025. And you're looking at our ever-growing pile of ghost pots, lost pots that we brought in. Some are abandoned pots. Some had live animals in them. Some had dead animals. Some had nothing but sea grapes. But you're going to see a lot of video here of us in small boats out in cold weather during this winter project looking for pots underwater, and in some cases pots that just had gotten abandoned that had a float still, but maybe had been moved off course or whatever. This is a drag rack. It was a test on the idea it's a heavy piece of metal with a piece of wood and nails and grappling hooks on it. It was surprisingly unsuccessful, even though it's not very big. You would think you could drag this behind and pick up a pot, but we really had trouble finding any with this technique. I think we got one with this, and but probably 8 we didn't get trying to use this thing. Generally, we found the pots pretty easy. The difference between finding a pot and then being able to put the hook you're putting down on top of that pot was the part we spent most of the winter, perfecting or improving against. We used kayaks and boats, different times, different techniques, just to learn what was possible.
This is actually on first day, our first pot of season, and it was a gale force wind day. We had a few of these days that were really choppy and kind of limited where we felt the small craft could go. Um, just enjoy the watching the 30-degree splash here. Few exciting shots. We don't have a shot of me taking Brent up river on just a couple of moments of really high winds and got like 10-foot waves coming over the bow. It was too splashy and hectic to film, but it was quite the visual. We were a little wet that day. This is our very first pot in season to pull out. It had a float, made it easy to find. And you can see the float under that on the bow deck there. And this was where we learned you don't ever let the floats get up under the crab pots because they roll out quite easily. But we grabbed it. I grabbed it. And returned it to the bow deck.
This is a Old Town Predator. It's a 14-foot boat. It's pretty wide. It's almost 3 feet wide at beam. So it's a pretty sturdy boat. And this is me putting in a nail rope. The nail rope has 3 weights, one at the near end, one at the far end, one in the middle. And as we used this and learned how to use this, we realized the idea of a float on the far weight gave us a lot of visual understanding of where the rope was in the water. And here you can see me, I believe I snagged one on this turn. There's I said 4 there because there was something in the water that just I would connect with, but could not get it out. It probably was a tree trunk or an old piling or something. It would snag, but I'd get about right here and it would just pop loose. So I gave up after 4 attempts. It's tiring. You can see it in my face. This is the last day. It was a fog, heavy fog that day. You could hear the foghorns out on the bay. And I was going over this channel again. I had not really hit it hard, and there was a fair number of things in it. And what you're going to see is classic examples of either degraded stuff or rotted trees or pilings. You can see there, it's really, you start putting a lot of weight on that thing and it gives, and you get a pretty good rock, It's a little sketch out there in winter to have your boat shake that much. You can see here, this is a tree, but from the other view, it actually looked like just a square. So it looked like a pot, but you turn and the sonar will represent it differently on the screen. You could see the tree in that one. And here, oh, there's another one. Just this morning, I hit like 5 or 6 of these things. There's the tree limb to go with it. That was probably definitely a tree. So, better sonar makes this part go away. We can see things in the water. They look like generally squares or possibly a degraded square, but you spend a lot of time and a lot of energy working on things that you're not going to get out. And you can see the frustration. I did this for literally 3 or 4 hours. Still had a little humor left in me for my football Heisman there, but this is the bucket we kept the nail rope in. You can see me putting it up probably end of a session or I'm moving to another location. And the weights and cleaning it, putting it in. Here's maybe a better version of it. See the weights going in, the nails on the rope, and cleaning the seaweed at the moment. I don't know what that specific seaweed's called. And you do get twists now and then. Sometimes you don't get any, and sometimes you get a lot. Depends on your activity. And to be honest, I think it was also the more tired I got, the more tangled things got. This is the other end, the far end. I have two weights pretty close together there, and these weights kept that rope pulled down to the water line or the floor. And there's the far weight float, I call it, tied to the end of those weights. And this fits right in the back of the kayak if I need to be there, get it out of my feet space. This is probably end of a day. I was wiped out. Now this is me shooting, picking up 2 pots on the kayak. It's the first time I did 2 pots. It was really shallow in February when I did this. Now these things are pretty degraded, so you can see the chicken wire's about gone, and luckily I had rebar, or I probably wouldn't even been able to get it up. Also rusted, falling apart. The chicken wire part of this is just collapsing in your hands. So the rebar bottom is really important for the structural ability to get this thing out of the water. Of course, balance is an issue. The suit I'm wearing is a Mustang survival suit or float suit. It's a PFD. It's a lifesaver foam inside. The panel in the back behind on my shoulders actually can be blown up and hold your head. But this suit will float and will essentially adjust the water to your body weight. It's not waterproof like a dry suit, but as it fills with water, it will warm to your body temperature. So it's a nice tool set for this kind of weather. Just some more shots of those 2 pots coming into the beach. Our testing was on Little Wacomico River this winter. This was worked out with VIMS. They wanted us to stay in one place because they had some other activities going on, and we were both on the Little Wacomico River. It worked out for us too. So that was the focus of the year to do our testing. Now, this is a pot we found. It has a rope, but no float. And so we picked this one with a sonar, found it, and snagged it. You can see the blue nail rope in the water. All right, this is one of the last days. I'm doing what I called a site search where I was looking for abandoned pots that had gotten lost. People forgot they were there. A lot of those were multi-years old. They were covered in barnacles, rotted out foam on the float. And the hardest part about this is figuring out which one's an oyster line, oyster cage, and what's a crab pot. And some of those oyster ones are very obvious they're oysters, and some are not as obvious. They're not quite in the same spot. So you can pick them up pretty easily and check to see if there's a perpendicular line tied to the rope. It's also crab pots usually have a lot of rope tied around at the float. So the combination, and so I pick a few of these up and validate that they were oyster lines, but they were. Picked up a couple pots there. That's actually two pots. They're so degraded you can't tell. It looks like one. Ran into a couple geese while I was there. Here's one at King Point. I'm sorry, Flood Point. This is Flood Point. Heading back towards the beach to drop these off. We've done the west side of the river and gonna throw these out and then do Rock Creek, the east side of Little Wacomico River. It's the eastern side of Little Wacomico River is called Rock Creek. I don't know history of that. Just how it's called. So this is heading out towards Rock Creek. That's Smith Point Jetty. This area is full. This is called Bamboo Island. It's their little channel beside Bamboo Island that's covered in crab oyster trays. So you have to be careful. This is Coal Island. One last check there. No floats. Time to head back. This is the LiPo battery and the setup on the kayak, one of the earlier shots. This was a portable unit. We put it in a bag. Right now it's just screwed down. That is the transducer, and we extended the transducer for the kayak to make it go straighter in the water. And we used a ice fishing bag that allowed us to move the fish finder around, but also allowed us to protect fish finder from water in situations like this where you're getting a bunch of splash over. The bottom is got a raised bottom, and there's wood and foam inside to bring it up a little bit. This is looks like a train. It's an oyster tray. That's a picture of a crab pot. Sometimes they're small like that. Sometimes they're square. You'll see some different ones here. Another crab pot or some obstruction in the water. Doesn't look like fish. This is what the sonar, there's different, you see sonar, down scan, and side scan. The bottom side scan, you can see the square there. The lumps you see on down scan and sonar are often the way they'll show up, or that spike, there's a spike version. Those look like fish, probably not though. That's the challenge, is you can see there's a box in the side scan, but could be fish in the top picture. And fish will show up with a shadow. This is the two pot video. Again, going right over top, they all look like spikes, but that's two pots. I know where they are. I think those two had floats on them, or at least one of them had a float and the other one didn't, I think. This is the same transducer put on a pontoon boat. We had some magnetic issues with the big engine there, having it in the back like that. But we were able to find pots. This is on the skiff again. You can see some of this is noise. The pots look like pots. The fish sometimes will show up. And then sometimes you just get noise. It depends on the churn in the water. So learning how to read that fish finder was mattered. Here's one of our very first pickups of a pot. We lost it. It took 2 days to get that one out. as I was playing with one single grappling hook there, and it was full of mud, and I couldn't quite get it out the first trip. Honorary first pot out. And see, that's the problem. The grabbing hook's just too small. The drag rack is also still pretty small. You can easily miss the pot in the water. So we've tried temporary floats. If you pick up a pot, you can't quite get it in, you can hook a temporary float on it. Um, and so that's what those floats are sitting in the front of the boat here with the green lines on them. They're just there to click onto a pot. If we bring it up and for some reason need to drop it back in, we can come back and get it. Um, didn't use them a lot, but still think the concept's a pretty good idea. Have a couple on the boat. Some, as we're out, also did a little trash pickup here and there where it made sense. Always grabbing the Mylars. Really cold day. Got the toboggan on, you can tell. And it was really shallow and gale force winds, so really difficult to navigate with a trolling motor, really shallow, hard to get a prop in the water where the pots were, and the wind was blowing you like crazy. So it was a interesting winter challenge doing this. This was an eel trap or a bait trap. We didn't have permit to pull that out, so it went back in. And here's me putting in the nail rope, one of the first runs of that. This is an early shot. It's not weighted yet. I kept all the rope tied up except where the weights were totally wrong. We miscalled that. But caught some pots with it still. This one had a float on it. It was pretty easy to see. So I was testing with, this is what you'd call an abandoned pot. It had been out there for a couple of months at least. I've been watching that pot for a while. It was on my early list to come get. It was full of sea grapes, probably the heaviest one I pulled in all year. And I would estimate about 80 pounds. As standing on flat ground, had a hard time picking that thing up and controlling it. I actually ended up bringing it to me the beach instead of trying to get it straight into the boat because just pulling on the rope doesn't give you the leverage. And so what we added, learning from this collection, a stainless steel meat hook that you grab the back and you pull that pot up to the edge of the boat, and then you throw a meat hook in on the top of it. And it gives you the leverage to pull it into the boat. So we added some meat hooks after this trip. This is me squishing all the sea grapes out of it so I can get it light enough to actually get it in the boat. It was like I said, probably the heaviest one we got. It's a really big commercial one too. This is the shallow water. This is usually 2 or 3 feet deep all year long, except for right this moment. So getting those pots in, sometimes you would get blown into where I went to the beach for this one. It's hard to get back out to the deep water. I was getting pushed out the jetty. I was having, running old spark plugs from last year still, and and the boat wasn't starting well. So 20-degree weather or whatever it was. So I ended up walking the boat about a mile in thigh deep water. Again, that suit gives me the protection to do that. We dealt with a lot of bad current conditions, a lot of wave. Uh, it was a rough winter. We had very few nice days. Matter of fact, I can't remember more than maybe one, what I would call averagely nice day. And most days, even when it was nice, would churn and turn. Okay, this is actually kind of unedited. There's a few cuts in this, but it's primarily unedited. I wanted to show how much time and effort goes into just one lift, because most of what you're seeing is trimmed down significantly. Um, and of course, on the kayak, it takes a little longer. Um, if it's a heavy one, and it's not always predictable why they're heavy, but often it's mud or they oyster shells or sea grapes in them, or bycatch. This one was heavy. You can see me trying to work out my stability And look at them. You can see the fuzzy on the top of that, and there's the bottom 6 or 8 inches is unfuzzy. That was in the mud. That part was in the mud, and I had to pull it out of the mud, and that's why it's so hard to get that first pull going. Matter of fact, I didn't think they came out at first until I learned that they pull long enough, they'll let go of that mud, and then you bring up that mud, so you have to let it kind of wash out of the pot if you're lucky. And if it's oysters and mud, it doesn't wash out as fast or as easy. So all those things kind of affect the weight. And there's two things. They're called a primary and secondary stability on a boat. Secondary stability is when you flip in the water. And so, if I was sitting in a chair, I probably could pick this up quite easily and throw it behind me. Although it's not light, this thing's at least 20, 30 pounds. It feels like 50 or 60. I don't know what's true. But because you're working on that secondary stability line, I'm constantly trying to just stay at the edge. Right there's a really close spot. Like you saw it come up at an angle. I don't have very much left there before it's flipping. So, and I hit my coffee cup there and knock my lid off of my Yeti there and start putting a little bit of goo in my coffee. It's early in the morning. I'm not happy about that. It's gassing, man. It wears you out. Sometimes you just got to take a break, even if it's got some crab goo in it. Get my line back. And of course, if it flips back, once you put it on, the weight transfers again. So you can't be so far to the other side that you flip the other direction. Um, the more I did it, the more I became comfortable with what my limits were. But the water's, this day, I think it's warmer. It's March, so the water's 42 degrees. It's still 42 degrees. And I'm in the middle of a bay, at the end of a mouth of a creek, at least 100 a football field away from land and about 10 foot of water. So, there's risk associated with going in the water here. And on the kayak, I had to bring each one back. Usually one or two was my limit. So you really can only cover so much ground. Now, this is the blooper reel here. I just couldn't get past myself this trip. It's a lot of ropes in a little space with hooks on them. So it happens. And you can see how heavy it is there. I'm picking that up on land and it's got a crab in it, luckily. And the crab was alive. We're out there. I ended up taking the bait trap about a month later and just putting it on the side of the shoreline because again, this had not moved for months and had nothing in it and no bait in it or anything. So I just took it to the shoreline. It was really shallow that day, so the owner can pick it up off the sand if they ever remember it's out there. Found a little trash while I was there. This is Cole Island, right beside Smith Point Jetty. It's the Outdoor Corporation's protected island. This is making the nail rope. You can see the weights from the fire hose. You can see on the right side the bent nail with the hognose ring holding the nail on the rope. That went really fast. This is a snow day. This week started with snow. So we did all conditions. You'll see in a minute some ice, breaking. Can't remember if I got a pot in this day or not. One of the nicer days there. We also could pick up abandoned pots. So there was some runs up the river. Not all of them were using sonar or fish finder side scan. And we just looked for floats to get those in. So this is actually a mix of a couple of these. I'm still doing sonar work, but I don't think I found any On this specific trip, I did find a couple floats. You can see me hauling up to one there. More of a recreational box here. Still well built, but not near as heavy. We use push poles to grab floats, but also to, push against the shallow waters. See how that additional leverage comes in to play. This one's a slightly bigger pot. It might be a commercial pot. These floats on these abandoned ones, they actually seem to be some of the older pots. They had more degradation. You can see I've got 3 in here at this point. 4 is pretty much the limit on good sized pots. But the ones that had floats on them had been there for months, if not years. In some cases, you can see all the barnacles. The floats were degraded in big ways, and some of them, and tons of, junk on the rope and metal. And there you go. That's this boat is a 1436, 14 feet long, 36 wide, and you can put 4 pots in a person. And that's sort of what it looks like when you're done. It is muddy, messy. This is me breaking ice. Got down there, iced over, and broke the ice with a kayak before taking out the little boat, the skiff. Figured HDPE would hold up better than aluminum to the ice. Surprisingly, no damage to this kayak doing this ice breaking. Nail rope back at it. You see the far weight there. This is the other end of the rope. We get a U shape and you find the pot. You want it about 20, 30, 40 feet to your right side in this case. And you drive an oblong circle around that pot and, the rope will pick it up. This one area had some things that were so heavy. This is not one. This has a pot on it, but it was the meat hook again. And it's hard to get down there. You put, especially with 2 people on a small boat, if you both lean over, you might flip. So, part of this was just getting the balance right when picking up something so heavy. This isn't a problem a professional crabber would have, but if we have more recreational cleanups in the future, learning some of this about personal watercraft is also important. And I think we might be the first that have done this with a kayak. They all thought I was crazy to even consider using a kayak for any of this. I just do a lot of kayaking, so it worked out. And I didn't just use this big one. And we have a little footage of another kayak I used during this trip. Now, in this little section, there's something in the water that's really heavy. It probably is like an old beacon piling in the water, but hung it a few times, was able to prove that I could snag it 3 or 4 times, but could never move it. I think I got it to shake the mud one or 2 times, but 200 or 300 pounds at worst or at best, it was heavy. So we would have to disengage the rope, and which was surprisingly easy. Took a few swings at it. This might be a few swings at that. We tried it with the kayak and the skiff and with 2 people, and we just couldn't, there was nothing to be done with it. So we're using side scan primarily. This gives us, and it's a cheap unit. This is a few $100s. There's also something called LiveScope from Garmin or Mega Live from Humminbird that is a forward-facing scanning system. Those systems are $2,000, $3,000, and would be way more detailed. So we're kind of working in the worst scenario here as far as how successful we are to pick something up. And we're successful doing it. And when we started this, it would take us an hour. Actually, that first pot took me 2 days to bring in. Even with the nail rope, we were still taking an hour, 4 or 5 passes to find them. Sometimes, the first time with the nail rope, we just missed them completely. We got down to where we were in most situations, able to find and pull in a pot within a few minutes. So maybe 10 minutes. Because I got the heavy thing again. I just kept going. I just wanted that thing. It's only a 10-foot kayak. Not very big. Didn't try a commercial pot on that one, I don't think. Not this winter. I had picked one up in the past in it. This had a dead bluefish and a couple of crabs, 2 or 3 crabs in it. They were all dead. You can see as an abandoned pot, it had been sitting there a while. It's got a ton of seaweed and the float was chopped up pretty from the sun. So one of the better days from a weather standpoint. This is the far end of the nail rope, 2 weights on that. And you can see I've come up to the middle there, and there's a weight in the middle, and this is the near weight. I went fast on that. Anyway, this is the kind of the configuration with the outside float. And what we've learned is you want that pot 20 or 30 feet out so we can pick it up where that item is. You can come back and get it. This is another abandoned pot over by Sunnybake Ferry. Or Cayenne, whichever side you're on. You can see me scraping off the goo off the rope. That is so wet and muddy, especially in the skiff that doesn't have the drain plugs in it. You would fill up with just black mud so quickly. So it's kind of important to use some maintenance techniques, cleaning maintenance techniques as you bring it in. I think this is the one that has the one of the ones that has a fish in it. I don't remember what fish that was. Using the pole, that's the propeller for the pedal kayak getting locked in place. You have to pull it up in the shallows. Don't waste your boat going by. There's just watermen and us out there. I think we were out there more than they were. Or by Sharps Creek. This is the lost pot. It is a dexterity test. The weight, the cleaning, the mud shake. So you don't bring it all home in on a degraded pot like that. It's an interesting experience. And yeah, we got muddy, super muddy all the time. I washed that suit a bunch. Here's Brent pulling in one. This one I think had a float on it. I tried to get this one with the kayak and just couldn't get it. It was too heavy. So we went back the next day and got it. It is a bit scary that the boat will flip if you don't manage that balance. Second tier stability is challenged. And I had a broken trolling at this moment, and I was busy looking at that, and I got out there. The waves picked up. It was a pretty day when we went over, and it got dirty going back. And Brett got splashed a fair amount right here. I couldn't. I didn't have all the footage of it, but we crushed him a bit that day. We can, needless to say, Brent is a big fan of having a bigger boat to do this with, and this little 1436 I've put him in. It was. This is us both looking at the meter. We're looking for something. We got the nail rope off to the left side. It needs to be on this boat to the left side. And, we both watch for that square to show up and work the turns to bring in a pot. This one was so muddy and so degraded that you can see the meat hook's a little higher on this one. We just held on to it on the side of the boat. I didn't want it in. It was so muddy. We were not far from our drop spot. So you can just see how much chunky junk we get in every time. We started just dumping these in the water, 2 feet of water, because we weren't investigating them immediately. And if it had live animals in it, they were in the water still. So in a day, you just get knee deep in water and pull them out. So look at the mud on the side of that boat. We're not only picking up mud with this nail rope and the crab pots, but we're also picking up seaweed and salve, subaquatic vegetation. And that's another reason to use better sonar like Live Scope, Mega Live instead, or maybe a more expensive side scan, because the more you drag this rope, nail rope in the water, and this is better than a drag rack, the more salve you're pulling out of the dirt and less for the fish and the the aquatic systems and marine life that needs it. So this it's disturbing to the environment. And although I don't know that we did so much damage to the world, but you can see in our test here, but you can see that we did bring up a fair amount of this graybeard. I don't know what it's called. I should look it up. I got so much of it. I think it's associated with sea grapes because sea grapes were on this same product or species, and did a lot of that. Of course, you get wet. That's like a wet sponge out of your sink every time you touch one of those and put it on your lap. And look at it hanging off this line. Now I'm stuck on something here. I'm working it, but just off that line there, look how much grass is on that thing. Like to snag each other, seaweed. This was better on disturbing the floor, the water floor, but the better sonar, if we had better tools to find them and drop directly on that. Some of the crabbers in New Jersey that have been doing this for 15 years just use a grappling hook. Their sonar is so good that they know exactly where that pot is. So when they drop down a grappling hook, they know they're catching it. They don't have to drag anything. So, those are trade-offs because, we're disturbing the floor bed a little bit here with this, and the drag rack's even worse. It mows it with a vengeance. So, these are things to consider in future efforts. Not that there's one perfect technique. This is a technique that will always work. And then the question is, what are other techniques? How do we industrialize this? If the crabbers are going to do this, what tools can we provide them that improve their ability to find it easily without having to hunt and peck? That bar, unfortunately, is where the track is on this boat, track line, but that's the transducer for the fish finder. And it's nice to have that transducer not on the transom because now it's up closer. We see it before the boat passes it. You know, we might have the back of the stern, the transom's probably about equal with the pot when it's showing up on the radar, which allows us to turn on it. Of course, the water and the currents never participate. They love to throw you on top of the pot and push you to the beach, and so you're always doing a dance. It was one of those days that was wavy. You know, one minute it would be 1 foot waves, half-foot waves, and the next minute would be 2.5 foot waves. Uh, this one was really broken up. Again, we were close enough to the beach, just got it up to the side, limped our way over to. You can see all the mud washing off this thing too. These things, when they get this dirty. Um, This is just a little pot I picked up. You can see the mud on the glove there. And here's one I'm picking up. You can see the spot on the side scan. I'm going to drop a nail rope before start turning on that more uh, properly said. Now this was a very heavy pot. One of the last two of the season were ridiculously heavy. They both were 8 inches in the mud, had stuff in them, and this one was so heavy I couldn't get it in the boat. Fair number of oyster shells. You can't get those out till you get over. It literally was all I had. And unfortunately, I couldn't get it out of the water. So I had to paddle with it. And if you've ever kayaked and you put something on the side, people put trolling motors on the side of kayaks. They don't work very well. They have to be in the back. And same thing with a weight or an anchor on the side of a kayak. It affects the kayak to turn in circles. If that weight was dragging out the back, it would affect it. But having that 30 to 70 pound, whatever it is, hanging off the side there is detrimental to navigation. You're gonna see me take 15. I'm not gonna take 15 minutes in this video, but I take about 15 minutes to get over to that little shoreline, primarily because the boat won't go straight. So you have to do a circle and then like just slowly fade into where you're not going in the right direction anymore, do another circle and keep going again. And all this time you're holding up, what feels like the total amount of weight you possibly could hold with your hand. This is also the third day straight, so I was depleted when I would go down for a few days. I would be completely spent doing that work. Now this is a little nappy. Get finished. There's this little crab in my kayak after I pulled in that pot. Little female blue crab. I named her Little Nappy after Naps. Now that's not me throwing a little nappy in the water. That's always the oyster shells left on my shoreline when we would be done getting those off the shoreline out into the water. These are 99% empty. I think they're mostly empty. Um, and then to celebrate the end of season, I decided to take a March dip in the water and test that float suit out a little bit. Water was 45 degrees. It was freezing. It's a different hitting your knees and hitting your chest is different. But we needed to mark the occasion, and the suit worked. These are the last few. Didn't quite make it up to our pile yet. This is Brett, who helped out a lot this winter, one of our trips out. And this is the boat. This is what now I have to work on, restoring this boat. It really took a beating this winter. I didn't realize how much damage we do, but it's all part of the game, I guess. Getting muddy for Northumberland County. It was a great project, and I feel like we made an impact.